This is an English language episode with Erik and Elaine, both of whom can speak some Finnish. However, the topic, legacy and its problems, is so important that we cover the episode in English. Old Gopal software that still runs an investment bank. Things that we do out of habit. A fear we inherited from our parents. Or a 100-year-old family company that suddenly lands on your shoulders even though you never asked for it. That is what we call legacy. It is a situation your history has placed you in, and it shapes the choices you have left far more than we care to admit. And here lies the paradox. The past can be a chain that holds you in place, but it can also be a resource, weapon to fight with today. It all depends on whether we use it and whether we dare to look it in the eye. Today's guests have built their life's work on exactly this. Erik Åkesson is a Swede who lives in Finland. Behind him are 20 years in banking, captaining ships, military career, and constant reinvention of himself, to the extent that he now lives here in Finland. Elaine Stirling is a second-generation Finnish-Canadian writer. She has published a dozen novels translated into 13 languages, and spent years teaching executives to write with clarity. What brought them together was a coincidence and a bucket of blueberries. Together, in just 4 months, they wrote a book called Calista's Paradox. It is the story of a young woman who inherits a 100-year-old gemstone company, problems and all, and has to face everything the past has left behind. But beneath that runs something much larger. The book is also a handbook on these events. Some laws are universal. In a bank that has no choice but to be compliant. In an airline where safety comes before everything else. In an army that fights today's wars with whatever equipment it happens to have. And in artificial intelligence, which does not replace the old, but fundamentally reshapes it. Today, we talk about why the past is so hard to let go of, why we are afraid of risk, and how you move on from an old structure without burning the whole house to the ground. Welcome to the Negotiator channel. I am Sami Miettinen. Let's begin. Okay, welcome to the Negotiator channel. We have guests from the West End in Finland, Erik Åkesson.
Hi there.
You're originally from Sweden, right?
Yes.
And we have Elaine Stirling from Canada.
That's right.
Where from Canada?
Near Toronto, a city called Hamilton.
Perfect. And nothing to do with the Hamilton, the U.S. treasurer.
No, this guy was a loyalist from the UK.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. We are being recording this on the day after the Finns won yet another gold medal, and Canada and Sweden did a bit less. Yeah, but this is about your book, Calista's Paradox. But first, if you can tell the audience a little bit more about yourself.
Ladies first.
Sure. I have been a writer most of my adult life. I'm a second-generation Finnish-Canadian, which didn't really seem relevant until very recently. Spent formative years in Central and South America and decided I would rather be Mexican than Canadian at the age of 4. Then as an adult writer, I wrote fiction, published 12 novels, a poetry collection, and a business book. And then what happened? Then there was COVID, and I just sort of coasted until I met this fellow.
Okay. And Erik?
Yeah, so Erik, I am Swedish. I live in Finland, but I have a couple of. I have started off my careers a couple of times. I did the army back in the day when Sweden still had an army. Then I moved to Norway and I have a captain's degree. So that's like the one only cool thing with me. I can actually drive all ships now, no matter how big and anywhere in the world. But key takeaway from these years was that was not for me. I went back, took a master's of finance, and then I studied in some countries, Germany, Switzerland, and then I started in London. I worked in the big banks for 6 years, HSBC, and then Royal Bank of Scotland, and then I was in Nordea, that all Nordic people know what it is, in Copenhagen. Then I moved to Sweden. I was in Danske Bank in Denmark, Sweden, and Finland. And that was 20 years of banking right there. So I dare say I know something about banking. That's fair to say. And then I did a startup myself. So I have done true startupping, tech startup in the garage. And then I moved from there to being a tech consultant. So that is, I do three things at the moment. I work for Bearing Point, which is a tech consulting firm, where my job is to speak to C-level bank executives about their tech problems and how we can help. Then the second thing I do is that I have Erik Ventures, which is my own pre-seed venture fund where I buy early day startups, preferably fintech. And 3, I am an author together with Elaine. And we have just launched our first book. And actually, we will do a lot more books because we are becoming a publishing house.
Perfect, and I have to do this, so I get this as a gift. So a custom slogan. And front is of course branding, but on the back it says you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate, which is my book's subtitle. And talking about the books and their titles, your book's name is Calista's Paradox. But it doesn't actually say in the book who is Calista and what is Callista's paradox.
Well, it does say who Callista's is, but it doesn't specifically spell out what the paradox is. So in terms of Callista's, Elaine, why don't you?
Yes, Calista is a 26-year-old jewelry designer who has a fairly successful life in Central Europe as an account manager, and her father suddenly dies and she inherits a 120-year-old gemstone company. She didn't want the job. She knows nothing about being a CEO or a shareholder or a board member, and her first experience of the company is that it is larded with problems, issues that just go on for centuries. And I like to use a tagline of Dante meets Doctor Who in modern day corporate, because she takes some time travel trips to find out the origins of the legacy of the gemstone company, which legacy being Erik's specialty.
So I have to correct myself. It's true. This is a fiction about the lady called Calista, but then the kind of the theme of the book kind of conjures like a Greek Callista's paradox is like the Pandora's box, or something grandiose from the Athens.
Yes.
So, but this is actually about a kind of a fiction book on the real situations people face when they are inheriting companies or getting trust in the leadership positions.
And I can tell you that's the story of legacy, which is the theme throughout. And you have with you there if you hold up the purple one. So for those of you that are interested in banking, there was a purple. 3 years ago, we wrote a white paper from Bearing Point, where I work, partly. It's about Nordic banking 2033 and how to get there. The interesting thing there, it was a forward-looking piece on how bank technology is difficult. And the feedback was that we met about 50 CEOs with that. And the feedback was pretty much the same. They said, we would love to follow your advice, but we can't because there's so much legacy problems. And then it dawned on us that this legacy is something that we all knew, but we had never really articulated. And then we set out, me and the co-author of the first one, Mikko Ayub, previous CEO of Aktia Bank, and we started to talk to people that we know. And then we wrote the next white paper there a year and a half ago about legacy. And we did it together with a large group of very good people, I would dare say, not maybe necessarily me, but at least everyone else is very good. So I have 20 years of banking. I know a lot about banking legacy problems. Mikko has been CEO of a bank. He knows more about legacy problems in banks. And then we got Mika Stirkkinen, the former CFO of Finnair. He wrote a piece about aviation legacy. They have lots of similar but different problems. And then we got one of the Finnish top generals, Jyri Raitasalo, one lion general. He wrote about military legacy problematics. And we had Aino Juusola, a psychotherapist that has written about many books about inherited traumas. Inherited traumas are very interesting because they are someone else's, it's an experience that you have had that's not yours and it still affects you. And she has written books about that. And that is your own personal psychological legacy situation. So that piece right there is very sort of dry in the tone and it targets C-level executives. Then we met more than 100 CEOs. That's a lot. During a year. And we then collected more and more war stories, sort of examples, and we enriched this story. And the feedback was basically unanimous that, guys, this is really good. You should do a book. And then we decided to do a book. And there were some hoops and loops, and not every one of the co-authors previously had time for a book. So I set out myself, and then slightly randomly on the internet, I came across Elaine. That's a really funny story that you might tell you maybe.
Yes, yes. So the algorithm being what it is on LinkedIn, you just get these random people, and I happened to land on a photo of a young Syrian teenager holding a bucket of blueberries, and the poster, who was Erik, said that this young man, he had sponsored him as a refugee, and the poor fellow wasn't able to find work. Could we please help him out by buying this bucket of blueberries? And I had this, it's not a déjà vu, it's I suppose a flashback or something maybe legacy related, but because I remembered that my 4 grandparents had come from Finland to Canada in the 1920s, and my father, being an only child, first generation immigrant child, his true joy was going into the bush of northern Ontario and picking blueberries. And I looked at that, and it's so odd that it's come full circle that now Finland is a receiving country of refugees. So I spontaneously posted and said if I lived closer, I'd buy those blueberries. And Erik, being one to act very quickly on impulse, connected with me and saw that that I'm a writer, and that I also had 18 years of teaching corporate executives how to write. He said, I see what your experience is, and I'm looking to write a book. I wonder if you could give me some tips and pointers. Well, I did a lot more than that.
Yeah, and the book is about combining the facts with fiction, and also teaching with kind of a natural progression on the real case, which is the Calista's paradox, and kind of a transformative journey. Elaine, you mentioned you teach people to write. I mean, that kind of reminds something we discussed on our lunch. And my favorite Canadian is Keith Johnstone, and I did the masterclass with him in London. And is improvisation and part of this journey? And tell me a little bit about Keith Johnstone.
Well, Keith Johnstone is the god of improv, as you know, and we are so proud that he lived in Canada. He was British to begin with, but he taught theater first and realized that the joy of storytelling and spontaneity is suppressed right out of us in the education system, and he created systems that gets it back into we get back into our spontaneous selves. So he created an entire foundation of improvisation that is famous around the world. He had a theater in Calgary until very recently. He passed, sadly. But every person who has studied improv, including myself, we all start with Keith Johnstone and Viola Spolin in the States. Those were the two masters. So.
Yeah, and so you need to combine. Also, in my book on negotiation, it's kind of a hero's journey, so a kind of a classic build-up story. So, is there something like bringing the archetypes and the kind of learning from the age-old wisdom which you have incorporated in the book? Very
much so, and I want to just circle back to the improv for a moment, because what I've learned working with improv, as you have as well, it works in every setting, in life settings. Erik is a very fast thinker and a fast talker, and I learned through improv to just respond. And it really got us through writing the book in a record time of 4 months, the complete book. And then I have completely forgotten. What was your next question? Oh, the journey, yes.
Yeah,
so Calista was originally a goddess, and so I used her name partly for the musicality, but she also turned out to be a very misunderstood huntress. She was suppressed by the gods and Zeus, as they very often were, but she was a survivor, and so Calista in our novella is very much a survivor as well. The archetypes are there, and I would add that it's magical realism. Some people don't know what that is. They confuse it with fantasy, but it's actually a very deeply rooted archetype of particularly Latin America, where I had spent some formative years. So
yeah, I can see that but Erik, if we bring this back to the concrete things, what are the most common legacy problems companies have?
Well, so legacy can be defined in many ways. So you can have legacy in sort of many departments, or you can bucket them differently. The one that is easiest to understand, and it depends on who you ask. But first of all, if you ask the common man on the street, if they think about the word at all, they will usually talk about some king back in the day, maybe conquered a lot of land, and that will be his legacy. You will be remembered for something. That's usually how people talk about the word. For a consultant in tech, Legacy is immediately the outdated tech stack.
Mm.
That's what you immediately hit. So bankers and consultants. But legacy can also be cultural. All the structures we have in our mind. And you can find process legacy. This is the way we do it here, and then people never question it. So you can have and then you can have your own psychological legacy. You're scared of something because of something that happened, and now so you can't do certain things. The easiest one being you're afraid of spiders, and so you cannot go and visit the zoo.
Mm.
That's a legacy problem you have then. So these are at least the 4 obvious legacy situations. The book that we have written here is there is 3 parts in the book. So, and it's very interesting because I have learned a lot, and that's sort of maybe also a generic interesting thing about books. What is the main book buying audience? It's actually younger women, sort of 18 to 20, 35. And that's what Elaine said to me first. Erik, if we're going to do a book, we should write a book that somebody is going to buy. And the way is to get it on many different genres. So it can be a management book, but it should be a novella. Otherwise, you will send maximum 5,000 copies globally. And we are obviously going to aim to sell at least 1 million books. So, why not?
Mm.
So, and then we need to target so we decided to have a book that would be in many layers. So that book there has 3 parts. The first is a novella. And if you like novellas, you can read a novella and you can ignore the rest. And you will still find it very enjoyable. And then you will learn something about legacy, but you will not explicitly think about it. But if you read the second part, which you can also read in isolation, if you are a facts dude and you don't want to read any novellas, you can get a lot out of that too. But the real learning, we believe, if you read the story, and in the story you will come across, this Calista tries to rescue the company. She comes across many situations that they appear easy to solve at first, but when she starts to look at it, the history is dragging this down. And then when you read the second part, the facts, that will sort of look at the examples. So basically you can read the story and you will see the surface. But then when you read the second part, you will open the layers and you can maybe read it again and see it differently. And then the third part is 14 very different point of view on legacy. People that have had legacy problems, people that managed to get out of them, people that have seen somebody else in, but 14 very different kind of people. You should say some more about that.
Yes, well, especially coming back to Keith Johnstone, because one of the contributing authors is Will Luera, who is an American improv teacher, well known around the world. He's even taught the Saudi royal family. And he specifically uses improv in his article as a means of overcoming legacy, of facing it and coming to grips with it, and bringing out new skills such as curiosity and spontaneity that really speaks to improv. We also have film and TV people and business people. There's one woman whose name's withheld by request because her family legacy is so horrendous. A great variety of people who are brave enough to tell their story.
Mm. And then, of course, it's important to see how many ways, 14 ways or more you can get stuck in time, but then you need to be solution-oriented. And the first book, Palantir, gives to the new people is Keith Johnston's Improv and Theatre. I don't know if that's cute or worrying, but Palantir is one of the most successful consulting transformational companies with AI. So they go to company, whether it's a military complex or whether it's a company, and then they fix it from the legacy systems using AI. But you don't necessarily need to use artificial intelligence, but you need to move from your legacy problems to, it can be a disruptive future, but it can be also just fixing the systems. How do you do that then? What kind of guidance you give to the
how
companies?
to fix and that's of course very difficult, but the one important thing is this: when you are a consultant like I am part-time or partly, so Bearing Point for example, and any consulting firm, they will come in and then they will do some sort of well, first of all, if a company has problems of any kind, they will ask first themselves, can we live with this situation? And if the answer is yes, we can live with it, it's not optimal, but then you live with it because there are so many other problems to fix. But if the answer is we can't live with this, well, then you fix it yourself, or you try to fix it yourself. And if that doesn't work, you basically ask yourself again, that was difficult, but could we live with it anyway? And if the answer is still no, you get some help. Essentially, that's when you call the consultants. So by definition, consultants will never be called in when things are good. So we will always come in and face a legacy situation of some kind. And the first thing is always some sort of as-is analysis. What is the current state? That is usually very shallow and quick because people are eager to move on, and so the dwelling in the past will look counterproductive, and people believe you are up to no good and you're wasting their money for talking about stuff they already know. But an as-is analysis will happen, but it's, in my experience, way too shallow far more often. And then there will be a target state. People will say target state is a word you need to use a lot if you are a consultant. You know, the target state, it basically means where you want to get to. And then you will define, they will spend, you will have millions of dollars in consulting fees and hundreds of hours internally that are not billed for that will go into this target state. And then you will make a strategy, which is essentially how to get from here to there, like a string of plans to get there. And then you will make assumptions about the as-is. Yeah, the as-is analysis was probably right, so that's where we are, and then you move from there. The problem is that, what if you only look at the symptoms of the illness, but not at the illness itself? So it turns out that you are not here, you are there. Well, the strategy that was supposed to take you from here to there will then take you there. Mm-hmm. And even if you are here, but for different reasons, maybe you choose the wrong methods, so you end up only there, and not all the way there. So what we are arguing is that when you set out on change journeys, spend a bit more, instead of spending 100, if you have 100 resources or money or whatever, rather than spending 50 of it on target state and 50 on strategy and only sort of 0.nothing on the as-is analysis, do 45, 10. But upgrade the effort put on as-is analysis properly so that you actually know where you are and why. And we believe that is happening way too seldom. Mm-hmm. And that is a good advice on any change journey that I believe people do wrong.
Yeah, then on this Calista's fictional story, she was inheriting a family business on jewelry. I mean, is this inheritance and getting generational responsibility and inheriting somebody with the power and the jewelry, do those two things carry specific weight in the book?
They do very much, yes. So the gemstone business has environmental issues and employment and indigenous issues that had not been dealt with, and it's landed on her shoulders. So she seeks out the aid of a disillusioned consultant who has given up on corporate because he's been trying to instill new levels of knowledge in corporations that have been resistant. And I'll use a specific example that he most admires military for their legacy and their willingness to take it on and recognize the limitations, and the world is so resistant to listening to anything from military. We have such black and white perceptions of these extremes, but Calista is the one person who listens, and that's all he's ever wanted, is just one person to listen to what he believes is true. He has this mantra that the corporation that addresses legacy will outrun all competition. Trouble is, he hasn't taken care of himself. He has a physical legacy, and he may not live long enough to be able to give her the advice she needs and to see her through to the end of her journey.
Yeah, that's also a personal theme. Erik, you mentioned your past life and health, but also the banking world where you were with a lot of kind of a legal legacy, which is particularly toxic. Can you talk about the health aspects and the banking legal problems?
Yeah, there's one chapter of it goes under healthcare legacy, and in the book we have a couple of examples. So I give a personal point of view of one individual's legacy situation, but then we have a health coach in Austin that writes it more on a systematic level. And then we have a guy called, we have Zach Rosanova. He's a health coach in Austin, Texas, extremely good guy, and he has written this about how people get stuck and why. And then we have Matthias van Tool. He's doing his PhD now in healthcare, public, how to organize healthcare. And he looks at healthcare as a systematic error, how we actually treat healthcare as sick care. Essentially, we spend now, there's a certain amount of tax money available for different things. Among that, a slice goes to healthcare. But healthcare is sick care, the way it is done now. We essentially wait for people to get ill, and when they get real ill, we put them into these factories for treating them. It's called hospitals. And there we treat them expensively, and then we rehab them expensively, and then we send them back as good taxpayers. But actually, from a taxpayer's point of view, we should really take some of that money out and put it into preventive care, so people don't get as ill. And there is sort of consensus on that this is the right thing to do. But no politician can win any elections by saying, I will shut some hospitals down now, and actually, yes, some people will die in the next decade. But after that, we will have a far better health condition for all of us, because there will be less smoking, less drinking, more running. But nobody can win an election like that. So that shift will not happen. In terms of, if I look at that, so these are the three pieces on the healthcare. If I look at one example that I have put in there myself is, I'm 52 now, and well, it is what it is. It's a sort of a numerical fact. But I did loads of sports when I was young. Ice hockey and football and this and that and tennis and handball and everything else and sailing. And at some point also I did a lot of karate, so full contact karate. So really brutal stuff where you better know, if you step in unfit, you will literally be knocked out, fully knocked out. Kick to the head and you can really hurt yourself. So I was pure muscle only, 76 kilos with virtually no fat, because I had to be below 80. Otherwise it was heavyweight. And then you literally get killed. So it couldn't happen, because 80 is unlimited. You can meet people at 120, 30 kilos. So at that point, I was extremely fit. Now remember, I got my first job in banking, and I thought, aha, I'm a banker now. I bought an Armies suit. I remember it. That suit fit for less than 2 weeks, because I put on 10 kilos like that when I moved to London. Because I started in corporate finance. It's like the worst place you can be in terms of hours. So I started as an M&A analyst in a big London bank, and I worked insane hours, sort of 16, 18 hours every day, including weekends. And they made damn sure that you didn't sleep much. And training and eating and everything fell apart immediately. So I put on 10 kilos immediately in the first few months. And then I was in London for 6 years. I put on another 10 kilos. So I came back like 20 kilos heavier. Net and muscle mass have dropped too. So probably 24 kilos of pure fat added. Really bad. And that combined with, and also one of the reasons for that was that I moved from M&A to trade floor stuff, foreign exchange and commodity derivative sales, trading, structuring. So it's very, very competitive environments where you have to be in at 6 o'clock. You work sort of 12-hour days and you travel. And that's the easy days because you're on the trade floor. But half of the time you're traveling. Then you work 18-hour days where drinking is half of the job. So you wreck your health totally with extreme amounts of calories, no training, no sleep, and loads of alcohol. That's an extremely toxic combo. So I basically became quite fat and definitely very unfit, and I had lots of problems with that. But it happens gradually, so you don't notice it. But then after some unfortunate events, I decided I need to do something with this. And that's the journey that I described. Because I realized that I had sort of cornered myself in this physical, personal legacy shit situation where I was in a hole that I just kept digging. And I not only had to stop digging, I had to find a way out. And that's what this chapter describes, how I was very deliberately observed my legacy. And the interesting thing is that when I did that, it's just around the time when I started to write the original legacy white paper. So in the process, when I see now, 2 years later, writing a book, I realized that what I did was that I had a legacy problem. I applied a very thorough legacy analysis. Without that, I would not have been able to find the right methodology. And eventually this Zach Rosanova, Austin, Texas. Can I do some ad for Zach Rosanova? Sure. Definitely. If you have a health problem, if you are fit and if you are fat and you want to be fit and you work way too much and you're sort of 50 and you're willing to spend a bit of money on fixing it, find Zach Rosanova on LinkedIn and connect and say hi from me. He will basically give you all the tools you need to have a data-driven approach to fix nutrition, sleep, training, stress levels, everything. So now I dropped 20 kilos in a year and put on lots of muscles, and I am where I want to be.
Good.
That could not have been done.
And that's also what I did between the marriages, get a personal trainer and get back in the business. So I also was in Credit Suisse and other banks, so I absolutely know what you're talking about, and also get a bit of a weight myself there. But then the other question was about the legacy and banking. I mean, you've done corporate finance and derivatives, but we all know. I also been in the RBS and Nordea, by the way, and I was in the RBS times when they had already failed. So clearly they had some bad risk management on the M&A, but then you have other type of legacy problems, like you have a too eager regulator who prevents everything and wants just like admin, and that's another thing. How do you see the banking and risk management?
Yeah, and that's also, and please, Elaine, tell me if I forget something, and do interrupt me. The one interesting thing is this. When we start to look at this, you realize that these different sectors, like banking and aviation and military, They have their own legacy problems and situations, and they solve them to some degree in different ways, but there are some really good learnings across. Of course, I am a banker and I am a consulting to bankers, so I think a lot about what can bankers learn from them, but there are other learnings too. But if I sort of answer that first, a legacy problem within banking, banks are very conservative, and they should be. Because we all want the payment systems to always work, we want the mortgage lending to continue, and so on. And people complain that the banks are so conservative, but hey, I can tell you it's better than the alternative. All the complainers should think about the payment system failing for a few days, because somebody failed fast a little bit here and there. It is actually in the interest of all of us that the banking system works really well, and it's very well protected. That's why it's so heavily regulated. The problem is the following, and here is a learning from aviation. In aviation is also heavily regulated, and for a very good reason. We don't want the aeroplanes to fall down, so we die. So everybody can agree that it's really good that they have extremely strong safety first culture in aviation. Everybody loves it, so do I, so do them. The problem is this, that there is sort of a negative halo effect of this, that all the people in an aviation company, they will work in the same offices and they will talk to each other, and then the people that do the website that are supposed to create how you buy a ticket, they undergo the same scrutiny on safety culture. I know of one aviation company out there that had as a corporate policy, they had 3 priorities. First, safety. Number 2 is punctuality. And number 3 is service. It's always in that order. Safety first, and then be on time, and then service your clients. That makes a lot of sense when you think about let's never fall down with the planes. And the problem is that if you are responsible for the website to develop the new customer journeys for how to buy tickets, safety is not maybe really so important, and you could allow for more fail-fast culture in that part. And we have the same. So how to segregate a very, very strong safety culture from other parts of the bank and deliberately let some parts of the organization live with higher risk. It should be a management decision. And in the banks, we have the same. Everyone knows in a bank that compliance and regulation and credit, they rule everything. And for good reasons. It shouldn't stop working, and you shouldn't lend money to people that don't pay back. And the problem is that somewhere else in the bank, you will have somebody working on the client UX, and there will be some products that aren't that systemically important as payments, and you can actually allow for some failing and trial and error there. But it doesn't happen because the safety culture in the aviation, and in the case of banking, the compliance will rule everything all the time. And nobody critically thinks about the fact that is this part of the bank really that crucially important? Like corporate finance is not systemically important. Payments is. But still they have to do the same. And I think there you should have some critical thinking about that. That's one learning from aviation.
Yeah, Elaine, then since you have written those other books and you spend time in Latin America, for example, the magical realism is interesting. I mean, Gabriel Garcia Marquez and the 100 Years Solitude, and then in the trivial and Paulo Coelho, and that I don't know if that's but you can have trivial learnings even from that kind of journeys or high brow culture. But I guess we live in a kind of a magical realism ourselves. We have the sort of hard facts happening, but then you need to take improvisation and see take some kind of a magical journey of what could be, and use your imagination to make the world a better place, or whatever you want to achieve strategically. Did you use that magical realism themes on this book?
I absolutely had to. Magical realism plus improv, because I could not have survived those explanations of legacy otherwise. Because we were an ocean apart and I'm 7 hours behind, he would arrange teams meetings with all of these experts, everyone from the Brigadier General of the Finnish Armed Forces to the aviation fellow and many others. And it would be 3 a.m. for me, and I would be hearing things like negative halo effect and having no idea what that is, and thinking, okay, if that was magical realism, it would probably mean this. So I had this whole other fantastical process going on as I was absorbing this, really with zero comprehension. In fact, Erik says it very often, that you really know writing, but you're so clueless about other things. And he's right. And it's the ideal world for a fiction writer, because you have to go into it with a beginner's mind, much like improv. You don't pre-plan. You're in the scene. You got to deal with the scene. So for me, the experience of absorbing that information was very much Calista's experience in suddenly walking into Lex's pub, giving a bit of the story away, and finding out that it was much more than a pub. It was actually a portal to other worlds.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about the other books. Are they
Sure.
part of a series or
Yeah,
work, or?
some are out of print. I started off as a romance writer, which was the last thing I'd planned. I was a new mom with a baby, and I had given up a really good corporate government job as an immigration counselor. And I was so offended when I brought the birth bag home because they had a Harlequin romance in there. I thought, what did they think? That my brain is just going to die because I'm a new mother? And I must have bitched about it for quite a long time, because my husband said, would you just stop grumbling about it and just write one, because you've read so many books? So I will. And I spent 3 years writing a bunch of manuscripts that were all rejected. And just as I was on the verge, like I was really getting the hang of it, my husband left the house. And so suddenly I was a single mom with no job and a bunch of rejected manuscripts. And somehow thank the gods, 3 months later, I sold my first 2 books, published 10, translated into 13 languages, and I was able to raise my kids and pay the mortgage. And it was a very good start. And it also teaches you to write fast, or fail fast, or however you might put it in the business world. And then I thought I'd do something serious. So I gave up writing romance novels to write the great historical novel about a famous woman in South America. And I spent 14 years failing. I mean, literally failing. And while I was failing at that, I was teaching corporate. So there were these parallel streams going on that I didn't realize that the corporate would then give me the skill set to be able to communicate with people like Erik, because I had to stand in front of classrooms with 40 people from all different industries and levels who didn't know how to write an active sentence and would never start a sentence with I, and just thought that writing was boring. And so there was a lot of life lessons there, and gave me the kind of resilience that I needed to complete this project with Erik.
Yeah. Suomalais-kanalainen Etelä-Amerikassa. That's something. Yeah, but there's like in Argentina there was like a Finnish colony, and it's in old times people tried crazy shit. And,
they did. Some succeeded, some didn't.
Yeah. The romance novels. I'm not the expert of that genre. My wife is in the book business, but I remember she get the early publishing copy of the Twilight, and then she was reading, and then she said Sami, why can't you be a vampire?
Oh!
So the expectations
They're very
of the
sexy,
women.
those vampires.
Yeah, but good on the Calista does the sort of hero's journey, and takes on the legacy, and brings her own talents to the table, and then mixes that with the legacy of the company to try to transform it in, and encounter some magical realism there. So which of the 3 parts you think is the sort of the most important?
The fiction, obviously.
Yeah, I guess I'm very diplomatic always. So it depends on who you are, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you are a facts guy, then the second part is. But if you're a novel reader, then the first one is. I think the third one is actually, they are very short. They are sort of 2, 3, 4 pages each. So they are more easy to consume in that sense. You can read them, and then maybe if you start to read one, that wasn't for me, you can drop it and do the next. But I have a hard time to think that, one of the 14 point of views should be appealing to everyone.
Yes. The universality of the book is what I'm most proud of, is that everyone who picks it up will find something that they will relate to, that, I have been through that. That's legacy? I had no idea that was legacy. So yeah, it's an enlightening experience. And we've been told and come to believe that Calista's Paradox does for legacy what Sophie's World did for philosophy not that many years ago, and which is why we were very careful about giving it a name, so that legacy will be forever associated with the the phrase Callista's paradox, much like Foucault's pendulum, Occam's razor, Archimedes' principle. So we were going with that theme.
Yeah, I loved Sophie as well, the Norwegian guy. But I mean, it was I had studied philosophy as a sort of a young person, but that kind of was a very nice way of retelling the history of the philosophy. And also in a kind of a hero's journey way. I mean, Joseph Campbell had this theory that we all live these archetypes, and then there's a particularly appealing way of telling stories, which is the hero's journey or growth story. So is this also a growth story?
Oh, very much. Yeah, hero's journey. I was a huge fan of Joseph Campbell back in the day. So once you start absorbing him, you never get it out of your system. You realize it's an intrinsic part of each of us.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're gonna encounter the mentor and the shapeshift.
That's right. The refusal of the call, the false dawn. Yeah, and go through it all.
Erik, you if this says nothing to you, think of Star Wars.
Okay. among literature professors here. So,
yeah, but it's a very interesting genre. I mean, there's of course the danger that you kind of if you do it in 3 parts, you say, well, here's the story, and now I'll explain it to the dummies. Is that kind of book?
Well, yes and no. I think it's more like you can read them separately.
Mm.
You don't have to read the second part. The story is interesting in itself.
Mm.
But then, unless you are unusually sharp, you're going to miss some of the underlying layers.
Mm.
I think when you read the second part, I think the dream would be the following. Somebody reads the story and thinks, oh, that was a good story, really interesting, and there were some problems there. But yeah, okay, let's continue. And then they read the second part and the third. And then they read the first post again, and they feel that they are reading a new book, basically. That sort of, ooh, it was black and white, and now it's in color. I didn't see how this sort of came from there. Because that's one of the things that also comes up in the story, that the whole family business builds on the myth of the legendary founder that turns out to not be so glorious. So, you have these legacy situations that people build on things.
Mm.
And then when you sort of unearth what things are really like, then people have to question the path and the past.
Your comment about legacy for dummies reminds me of what Erik has said about my writing. When I first wrote the initial drafts, he said, well, first of all, you're not a very good writer, Elaine, because you haven't really touched on legacy at all. And he didn't understand the concept of a first draft, but we were yelling at each other too much for me to even explain that to him. But what he did help me come to understand is that I do tend to write longer words. That is just my style of writing. And I was obliged to learn to write in a simpler style for the non-English speaking or the non-native English speaking population. And we do see this as a global read. So I'm very grateful to him that he's taught me this whole new level. And it's not a level for dummies at all. It's a level of clarity that perhaps I didn't have before, because I do love complex sentences.
We have some beautiful quotes along the way that are not for day life, but I will not effing dumb down this to please people like you. So, but I think what I tried to say to Elaine, and I think that's sort of a universal thing for high-level native English speakers. There are people out there that aren't dumb. Like I'm not so dumb, but English is like my second language, and some of these very long words that they use is like. And I still have lived in London. I speak decent English, and I've lived in London for 6 years. You will find very few people that have English as a second language that are better than I am. So I said, use me as a proxy. If I don't get it, nobody will get it, other than other real native speakers. And that was a bit of an anger moment for Elaine, that couldn't use these really long words that at least I didn't understand. And I think Elaine struggled to get. You would have like the perfect word in store for like, okay, I will have this word and it will be what I want. And then I said, but I don't get that word. And she would have to use like some less cool word. And I think that might have disturbed Elaine.
I did, but then I adjusted to it and actually came to enjoy it. And when we were at the book launch the other night, we had a senior woman, a CEO of a prominent insurance company, come up to me afterwards and say, I think this is written at exactly the level for high school or upper elementary school children to begin to learn English and complex concepts in English, so that it was the right level of reading. So I was very pleased with that.
Yeah, and I need to sort of let's toy with Erik. When I was learned to write, I very much like the guy called Lajos Ergi, who had this art of dramatic writing, and his book's theme was that every great book will have exposition management. So that means that you have to have a great theme, and great books have a theme where you have a transition. For example, Shakespeare's all books have this exposure, the management of the underlying theme. For example, Romeo and Juliet is about how love conquers everything, including death. So you start with two stupid teenagers, and you end up with the man who sacrifices himself for love. So he does like this growth, and it's different kind of a journey than the hero's journey. So I'm saying that this grand theme of this book is the legacy. So you have a person who starts at under the sort of base level of legacy, and then learns through the book that.
And she takes on leadership. That's the ultimate goal, is she takes on the role of leadership, which she had never seen in herself or imagined in herself, didn't even want it, but she takes that on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sort of guided by this consultant in the book that helps her to sort of start to believe and trust in herself. And I think that's very important. I think maybe that's specifically, maybe it's a Finnish thing, like the lack of confidence in stuff. Like, come on, do it, you can do it. Yeah. I think way too many people hesitate. Like when we wrote this book, there was many moments when people told, first me, when I was alone, that this can't be done, and come on, Erik, you're going to do a big... And I remember when I said to some people that the aim is to sell 1 million copies, I was laughed at. I was made a laughing stock. They thought it was insanely funny, and that I dared to think about that. And I think it's just pathetic not to. Like, why not? So, and it makes me angry that people are trying to put their boundaries on me. I'm not going to take that shit. And the thing is this, that maybe you set out to say, oh, the goal is to send 1,000 books, and then you do 10,000, and you call it a roaring success because you're 10 times above the... So what if I aim for 1 million and sell only 100,000 then? Am I a failure then? But I still send 10 times more than them. They define themselves as a success only because they have so pathetic goals. That makes me sort of sad and angry. And I think as a foreigner in Finland, I think, you can allow yourself to dream more a little bit. There's nothing wrong. And there's a very big difference between dreams and illusions. Dreams can come true, so they are okay. And I invest in dreams, but illusions I don't invest in because they can't come true. It's very important to know the difference.
Yeah, still coming back to this exposition. I love Milan Kundera's books because he takes some grandiose philosophical theme from Nietzsche, and then the whole book is about managing the exposure onto that idea and exploring it. And even in the sort of kind of micro level, the chapters can be about that theme and the kind of moving. But then longest time I thought that like you have to have like the Joseph Campbell's stuff, and then you combine with this kind of management of the grand theme and the movement, and skip everything else. But then that's why I started doing improv, because it's not that you have to take the breaks out from the main story and just go crazy.
Yes, and you have to accept what your scene partner gives you and run with it. Yeah, you can't block it.
And then that's part of the book's themes, I guess, the kind of a scenario management. So if you're bound by a legacy and path dependency, and this is the things we do here, you might say, like you, Erik, said, well, we think we are here, we need to get there, we just future cast ourselves there by step. But that can be a mirage. You could be completely somewhere else. And you have to think of the scenarios, and the world doesn't give you easy path. It gives you randomness.
Yes. And I think, and I would like to say a few words. I'm now just thinking back at what can you learn from this industry? So if the first one we're thinking that this safety first culture from aviation is the same as the credit compliance culture in banking, the others can learn from that and sort of look at, in your industry, can you separate what is systemically important and has to be run with an extremely high level of sort of trust and stability, and where can you, and you need, as management, you need to be quite explicit about that and say, actually, dear company, we know that in this part we can never fail, but actually we have decided that there we can fail. And I think, so otherwise these people don't dare to fail. So that distinction. Another thing the two things I would like to sort of say then, One is the concept that we have about optimal rate of change. And the optimal rate of anything is quite interesting. And in this case, optimal rate of change. But I'll get into that. But before that, a few words on... So in the process of writing the first legacy white paper, and by the way, for those of you that want to, if you want to read about legacy, the easiest way is to buy Callista's Paradox and read it. If you want to dig down deeply, you can go into Google or anything and search Bearing Point Legacy White Paper, and you will get to a page where you can download that report for free. Then you can dig down even deeper. But when we were writing that, we had the pleasure of then working with Jyri Raitasalo, which is a very intelligent individual. I sleep a bit better at night now, actually, when I know what kind of... Because I did the army back in 1994, and I wasn't sort of overly impressed with like the lieutenant's sort of general, intellectual ability. I was kind of thinking sometimes, are these guys going to lead me in war? How will that end? But now I know what the top brass looks like and how they think. And I sleep a little bit better now. I'm very, very impressed about sort of the intellectual capacity of these people. And Jyri, first time we had a lunch with Jyri, me and Mikko Ayub, we had a lunch with Jyri, and he sat down and said, well, thank you for explaining what legacy is. I know it. Military capacity planning on a senior level is about thinking in the decades. Legacy management is pretty much what I do. For me, legacy is positive because it means that we have something to fight the war with today. And I think that's a very sort of interesting viewpoint. He viewed this as a positive, not as a problem, not an aggregation of shit that you can deal with. He said, well, there is an aggregation of war material so we can defend ourselves. Isn't that good? Then we want to improve on it, of course. But the military have, they stand, because of the technical nature of the systems and the interoperability between different systems, they have a lot of path dependency. So once you steer down some route, you exclude others. And he said that, so if the enemy comes for us today, we will defend ourselves with the weaponry that we dig out of the mountains now. And it will be anything from new back to 40, 50 years old. But the human body doesn't know if it gets killed by a 100-year-old bullet or a hyper-modern rocket for 100 million from outer space. You just die. So it's irrelevant. What you need is killing power economically, because you have, and that's a very harsh way to view it, but you have limited resources to kill the enemy. So you need to kill with the limited resources, as little as possible. So what he said is that we will fight now with the material we have now. We will not fight with the drones we will buy in 2 years, because we don't have them now. And the other interesting thing there is that everybody tells the military that you should buy more drones. Why did you buy F-35? Oh my God, how stupid. Yeah, the difference is that a drone nowadays has about 3 months technical lifespan, because the opposite side, it will take them roughly, and they see it in Ukraine now all the time. And I'm not speaking as me. This is all knowledge derived from a general, so it is not me inventing this. What we can see now in Ukraine is that the others, when you have a new drone type, the enemy will take about 3 months max to figure out how to take them down electronically or with some other way. So if you buy a drone today, the coolest you can find, and you wait for 3 months and you send it up near the borderline, it will be taken out immediately. So to buy drones and store them is totally pointless. What you need to do is to reserve monetary capacity for future flexibility. You need to have ability to buy, and you need to make sure that there is industrial power to build them. That's why this industrial like the build-up of the Western military complex is so important, because we don't know now what we will fight with in 10 years, but we need to have the ability to build it then, because we can't buy it now. And even if we could buy it now, it would be stupid, because by then it would be outdated. But the big jet, like the jet fighter, the F-35, for example, it is actually it's a jet fighter. Yeah, that's what meets the eye. But actually, it's a flying weapons platform. It's a hub of the intelligence collection platform. It's an integrated communication platform. And the interesting thing is, once you buy into that, you exclude many other. It will also define what missiles do I have to buy now, 30 years from now. So when they buy the F-35, they essentially dictate what Finland will defend itself with 30 years from now. And what the general said is this, that right now there's a war going on in Ukraine, and Russia is sending older and older material into battle, and people sort of cheer that on, and they believe that it's a sign of that they will lose, and maybe they will, maybe they won't. But what is sure is that they will wipe out the legacy stack of guns and ammo. And they have a remarkable ability to rebuild that now. 30 years from now, they will have a hyper-modern army free of legacy, and we will roughly have the same stuff we have now. The people living 30 years from now should be really worried if they don't modernize the army now, because it's a relative game. So that's the one thing. Now, because legacy is so important in the military context then, they are, whether this is something they have thought about and decided or if it's an evolutionary thing, nobody really knows. But what they do is that they are very aware of the importance of the long-term decisions. So what they have is a separate think tank for that. It's called the headquarters. And the interesting thing is that every big corporate will have a group strategy. Now, the interesting thing is this, and I have actually been in the group strategy of a bank, and I was surrounded by sort of the consulting reject club. A lot of ex-consultants that couldn't move up, so they moved out in there. And then you were sitting there, working on the strategy with other people, and I was the only one that had ever been in a bank. And then I was thinking, that's very strange, but that's what happens. You have group strategy with a X amount of ex-consultants. They have never been in the business. And then they decide on the behalf of the business. But in the military, every single general started in the army. Nobody has started somewhere else. So what happens is this, you start as a conscript, and then you move up. And when you are sort of after 10 years or so, you're a major. Then they will say, if you're promising enough, hey, you are promising. We are the kind of thought material leadership kind of person. We want to think about the future capabilities. So why don't you take a posting in the headquarters? That's essentially their group strategy. They take the smartest people after 10 years for a first stint there. And then they are major and they maybe become colonel there. And then they work on these long-term strategic decisions. But they have spent 10 years in the business. That's not the case in the group strategy of most corporates. You will have the clueless consultants there. And that is a lesson that we think that they can learn from. Try to take you can have the really good consultants too, because they have other skill sets in terms of planning and driving change and all that kind of stuff. But the domain knowledge is not really up to scratch. What we think is that take some of the best people from the business and put them in these functions for a while. The problem is then that you will take the best P&L producing capacity out of production for a while. So the business will scream, don't take these guys, they are the best. Are they going to be doing these PowerPoints now? Yeah, well, what are you going to do then? Take the dumb people. Then you will certainly have a bad future. So you have to take deliberately, and you need to celebrate these people. You say, we have elevated these guys to here. Now, after 5 years there, their current knowledge about the business is now eroding after 5 years in the headquarters. So they send them back as colonels. Now they are a colonel and they are a brigade commander or something like that. So they top up again in a different function on frontline expertise. And then they are back. And then they are back again maybe as like Yuri was, he was the commander of a brigade. So in peacetime, 3,500 soldiers, and I've actually been invited to an artillery drill out there. Very, very impressive to see. And if there would be war, he would have 35,000. And now he's back in headquarters again. So if you look at the LinkedIn profiles of top brass, you will see that they move in and out of the actual business. That doesn't happen in the corporates.
Yeah, lots to unpack there. I think I agree with you on the kind of no need to store current drones things. We need to build the capacity to have factories to build and the logistics to build it. So that's then of course if Ukraine would decide to attack any European country, they would just wipe anything because they are by far the best army in the world at the moment with the modern drones. So then you would maybe a little bit regret that you didn't have at least something to counter the drone waves. But that's very, very unlikely. I think the aggressor is more likely to come from renewed Russia. But then on the Finnish army, we have a conscription, so we actually have a meritocracy. So I have spoken with a lot of the top brass as well, and I think it's safe to say that if you have a salaried army, they are run by more idiots, because then the pool of the you have there in the command channel is not meritocratic. Whilst in Finland it's conscription, so it builds up on the best of the best. Of course, you have kind of a Top Gun culture in America and like elite Marines and stuff. So which is a separate subset of good. But in a lot of the European countries, that's not the case. You have a hopeless kind of a salaried personnel. Nobody takes it seriously. There's no meritocracy. So Europe is very dangerously inefficient in the art of war.
And in addition to that, because until like 30 years ago or so, the enemy, the whole purpose of the armies was to defend our own territory against the big sort of open field tank war against Russia. That was the purpose of the army. Then that threat sort of disappeared. And then little by little people were like, well, do we really need all these? No, we don't. Sweden famously decided not to have it or much of it, but we needed something. And then what we did, but there was no war nearby and Russia would become nice. So what do we need them for? Well, there are people in Afghanistan that need some Swedish soft power projected to them and teach them democracy and other things, and also stop them immediately from killing each other right now. But in the long term, they should become more sort of European. So we started to actually we had an army not for the purpose or scale of war to defend the country now that way. Instead, they were going to project the country's values somewhere else in the world. So you started to have desert camo on Swedish soldiers. That doesn't fly so well in the Swedish woods with this brown camo and so on. And the whole warfare is different. And it's all about sort of keeping tribes apart, talking to leaders, semi-diplomacy. That's not what you read. Go ask Ukraine if they need that. No. So the whole purpose of the army, they were way too small and they were for the wrong purpose. And now we are stuck with that as a legacy problem. But there's one other interesting thing where I think that we can learn from this, and the drone discussion is very interesting because I think there is a good parallel to AI in the banks, for example, and probably many others too. So what I see as a consultant is that everyone is very keen on AI because it's so hot and we need to do it. The problem is that people don't know really exactly how to do it. And the implementation problems are well known.
Speak for yourself.
Yes, of course, you know everything, but me and the rest of the world are so utterly clueless. But the problem is that, and I think that people try to sort of showcase a lot what they can do. So they select they pour the resources into quite narrow use cases that become a little bit pointless. Maybe they look fancy, there is a chatbot and so on that this customer service can speak to. But the interesting thing is that you still have an enormous legacy stack of the processes that run right now. And they will, whether you like it or not, persist for some years. Maybe 3, maybe 10, I believe many more than that. But the interesting thing is this. If you have a drone in the army context, you can send it up and you can drop a grenade on somebody. It will have very limited explosive power right there, and then it might kill 1 or 2 soldiers. And that's bad, of course, but that's one hell of an expensive bullet to send that $1,000 drone there. Then you have over here hundreds of old cannons from 1970 with an unlimited supply of really old crappy shells. And they are a little bit inaccurate, but if you use that drone to send it up, take a photo, go down, and automatically communicate with all these guns, so that so if that little drone is used not to consume itself, but instead to elevate the enormous amount of legacy material you have by even 2%, that fighting power increase of the drone becomes dramatically bigger. So use the drone strategically for enhancing the value of the existing enormous amount of legacy. That's what our general said to us. That is sort of a better way to use the drones in that sense. And when I think of it as a banker, rather than to create yet another AI-driven chatbot that nobody wants to speak to, look how AI can enhance all the processes in the lending. How to do credit decisioning better. All the existing things, you should apply AI to lift the value of all of that. That, I think, is how the value of AI would become higher fast.
Yeah, and we had a little bit of a discussion on the AI dystopia, and I think since I'm so frankly good user of AI, I have several AI workers who are very good, high quality, and I can actually delegate them tasks, not as task lists, and just actually enhance my day-to-day work skills. For example, this morning I had a weekly report on the EU AI Act, so it will scan all the legislative changes, and it will make a markup changes to the policy of translink. You should edit this based on this, because this is the findings on the EU negotiation process and the Compass program. So it's relatively easy for me to do that kind of persistent jobs here, there, and everywhere, and scan various industries and opportunities, stock picking, global changes, so on. And then, of course, you can do like what you, in your example, the one drone did for the Finnish artillery. So you will have a infinite chain of agents enhancing all kinds of things. And it's only a matter of the imagination of what I have and then the quality of the tools that I put in place that you can take. And now we come to the kind of the dystopia discussion now. Elaine, you've been writing fiction and now non-fiction and about Need for Love and Harlequin type of books.
I mean, will there be kind of something left for us humans to do in the age of AI?
Yes, we will still fall in love. We will still look into another person's eyes and feel the world move. That is going to go on. And we are at heart, we are all creatives. And I believe there's going to be a, not a backlash, not that, a circling around back to realizing that we really want authenticity. And we will learn to recognize that and appreciate it, which we have not for many decades. We've just sped up the world and sped it up. And so that we can't even enjoy success for more than a millisecond. And I was talking to Erik about that today, that he is such a fast learner and operator and he succeeds moment by moment, excuse me, but he doesn't take time to just, wow, I succeeded with that. And I think all of us as humanity are going to relearn that skill. And that's why personally, I prefer to write myself. I don't use those tools. I probably will in admin situations as our publishing company grows. But for writing, that is my truest joy, to be able to elevate out of the mundane into a kind of time space or a timelessness, which Calista is given the opportunity to do as she manages her hero's journey.
Yeah, I think one thing what I learned on my hero's journey on the AI is that in last December, like many times ago, in ancient time when people didn't know anything about AI, in December 2025, I started building my second brain. So my thinking was that then I needed like a better notebook. So I'll put important things, like I store them, and then I use the AI to enhance them. But it was more like a replicating my knowledge base and my situations. But now this year, more and more I'm leaning on these AI workers, which don't do that. They have their own memory, very well curated, and own learning systems, but they still lean on me for like the base truth. So important things I teach them, like I would for kids, like this is base truth. Keep this in as a sort of a in your mind unless I learn better truths. And once you do that persistently over time, use them to sort of explore the world on your task and improve their own tasks, and anchor there like a base truth to my thinking, then it becomes quite a beautiful system, and it's better than you, and it's definitely better than just the AI.
Yes.
It's a system.
Yes. Learning better truths as you go along. That's fabulous. It's a really spiral rise to infinity.
Yeah, and this will change, like what Erik was saying about the droids or the military power or competencies. You can have a legacy truths, but then you can like reframe them and use even the old stuff in a better way and more efficient way. And it's a system. So I'm building a system of human AI intelligence. So I think that's maybe something where our hero Calista could join. Maybe she could meet or her kid could meet AI and start this journey from the beginning.
Well, we do plan to have sequels on Calista because she's just beginning.
Yes.
I think there's one interesting thing with that, as a final note on the military. There's one very key difference between the military and all other organizations, and that is that military can never recruit other than graduates. They can only take graduates, then they can never recruit more. To tell that, you cannot go, oh shit, we have some bad colonels, let's hire some from some other army. No. But corporates do it all the time. So, go tell, I don't know, so take Microsoft, whatever, the highest HR person in Microsoft, and tell them, as of now, you can only fresh graduates as the only hires you can ever do, forever. I think a couple of things would change with A, how many they hire, and B, how well they train them, and then how much you invest in your people now that failure becomes so costly. I think, I don't have a good answer to that. I just think it's a very interesting observation. One more point that I would like to make, which I think is very interesting, is the optimal rate of change that we have introduced here in the white paper that we talk about here. So for anybody with a finance background, you will have in the portfolio theory, there will be an efficient frontier where you can choose between this possible return with that volatility, and you are indifferent between sort of that and other combinations of risk and volatility or volatility and return that you are indifferent with. So something similar applies, and that's thinking we took down to change management. So the thing is the following. society will move at some sort of pace. That would be in the portfolio theory of finance. That would basically be the risk-free return of the government, sort of the base rate that you can get risk-free, and that's society's rate of change. So if you move slower than society, that might work for a tiny while, but pretty soon you will basically be out of business because there are so many better alternatives. So that is the minimum level of speed you need to have, and that you can have without causing much trauma to the organization. You got, hey guys, we need to move as fast as society. People will go, yeah, that sounds smart. Let's do it. And then you don't have to fire anybody. You just do stuff. The problem is that most people have a higher ambition level than that, and that's how development happens. So then the big bosses will say, we need faster because we need to outperform the competition. So we need to move faster than the average. And that's when you need to start to put some pressure on the organization. Somebody is going to feel squeezed. And eventually you can push so hard that everyone burns out. You can put so high change pace that every single person burns out. That's not good either. But you need to find that balance between the speed and the side effect. So, you know, we have come... sometimes when you explain complex concepts, the easiest is to take a super mundane example. And I usually take an omelette. If you're going to do an omelette, you have to break the eggs. We all get that. So that's the minimum sort of drama. Otherwise, there is no omelette. But you can do an omelette without breaking the eggs, killing the chicken, setting fire to the farm, and kill the farmer. You don't need all that to do an omelette. So the question is, what is the right balance? How much sort of side effects are you willing to do? And I think that there comes the problem in the risk-averse businesses, such as banking, that the good choice for the senior management is to, I get paid €1 million a year for this job. Another 4 years and I'm done. Whoa. And the big change program will be an 8-year thing. And they are. The big change programs, core banking system changes, are sort of 8-10 years or more. And all the costs are front-loaded and all the benefits are far-loaded. So you end up in a situation, and then thinking about the average time of a CEO is around 4.7 years, the same with the board member. So now, if you're a new board member or if you're a new CEO, it will take a year to figure out what to do, and you likely now have 3.5 years left in the job. And then your choices are, should I kick the can down the road and things kind of work and it won't be my fault and I don't rock the boat? And there are no big costs here, and things work, and I get paid lots of money per year. Or should I launch this massive transformation project for the benefit of the future? And I have 3.5 years left, and all the costs would land in that 3.5 years, and then the benefits will land with the next guy if it goes right. If it goes wrong, it will go wrong faster, and it will be my fault. It's a very easy decision to decide to kick the can down the road then, and that's why a lot of these things don't happen, because people don't have the benefit. The incentives are not in favor of supporting the long-term transformational bets. And I think that people need to, when they set out on big change journeys, they need to have this discussion that if we're going to push change fast, how much side effects are we willing to take? Because right now that is sort of an unpleasant discussion. And I have done many big change journeys myself. I have been given a number of failed teams that I've had to clean up, and the bosses always said, they send you out like this. Hey Eric, fix this team, but it's broken, fix it. I'm like, okay, I'll do it. But don't make them angry. Okay, I will try. And then a year goes, and I have to sack this and these guys because they refuse. And they reject, and they stop all the people that want to make progress. So I'm going to have to sack them. So I'll do it. So I do it. And then there's havoc in the Nordic. It's very difficult to sack people in the Nordics. So you're not even allowed. I've been in organizations where you're not even allowed to use the S word. They said, Eric, you be called into me and said, Eric, you suggested that some people might lose their jobs. I'm like, yeah, of course. That we don't talk like that in this organization. And guess what? A year later, they had to sack 20%.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's good analogies there. I'm a finance man myself on the efficient frontier, so you have a risk-free rate and then the very risky business with high beta, but you still kind of make first as an investor or company your choice in what kind of risk level versus risk-free return you want to take, what kind of a base volatility you are willing to accept, and you can pick a safe regulated infrastructure business where you have
or
less
a portfolio.
Risk. Yeah, or portfolio. Or then you can go all in some sort of a really disruptive new technology. But then I think the Finnish society has, and that's the open hate in Finland. Is that the whole society has built all kinds of ways to kill the volatility. And for example, the options, we killed the options with the taxation, so they become completely unusable in Finland. Now this right-wing government has actually reintroduced them, so we now can use options again, because those will be the tools that can be help the CEO to take the risk beyond his like a 3-4 year short-term risk-taking timetable, and get some benefit from the transformative journey he or she has taken in her time of office by cashing on the options. But we as a society, we have been very much focused on like killing risk everywhere, and that's why we have slowly been killing the Finnish economy.
Yeah, you have Europe's highest unemployment of 10.5%, and as a foreigner here, having lived in 7 countries, I lived first in Sweden, then I lived in Norway, then in Germany, then in Switzerland, and then in England, selling to all the Nordics from England for 6 years. Then I lived in Denmark, Sweden, and Finland again. So I have actually, I have 4 kids, all born in different countries, one in London, one in Copenhagen, one in Sweden, and one in Finland. So I'm one of the few people that can have an opinion, because I have seen the alternatives. And I am not surprised you have the highest unemployment in Europe, given the extreme risk aversion that people have.
Yeah, and that's why now it feels, this government, even if it has moved slowly, it's still changing those kind of fundamental structural problems. They've been kind of the negative legacy of Finland. But let's not take it too much in the politics. I think the important thing is we change the society by changing the people and the companies. And this book, Calista's Paradox, is an excellent way to achieve that, almost like a handbook on that. So thank you for your visit, Erik Åkesson and Elaine Stirling. I propose we have a short discussion on the Inside channel, and I propose we pick 2 completely different topics. One, for Elaine, we talk more about improvisation and the art of writing, dramatic writing, and Erik, I think we should talk about the London city, and the city boys, and
I thought it was
London scene.
No, thank you.
No, we will spare
you.
that. But as a reminder, Finland is the world champion in ice hockey once again.
Mats Sundin. Mats Sundin.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.